The studio lights blazed as Stephen Colbert leaned forward, his smirk sharp enough to cut glass. The audience buzzed with anticipation, sensing the tension in the air. Across from him, Pam Bondi sat poised, her smile unwavering, but her eyes held a storm. Colbert's voice dripped with sarcasm as he began, "So, Pam, after all these years defending the indefensible, do you ever wake up in a cold sweat?" The crowd gasped, but Bondi didn't flinch. A heavy silence settled over the studio as Bondi's fingers tightened around her chair's armrest. Her lips parted, and when she spoke, her voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. "Stephen, I'd expect cheap shots from a comedian, but not from a man who claims to value truth." The audience stiffened. This wasn't the usual banter. Colbert's grin faltered for a split second before he masked it with a chuckle. Bondi didn't wait for his next quip. "You mock me for standing by my principles, yet you built a career on ridicule," she continued, her tone measured but burning with intensity. The studio cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion. Colbert opened his mouth to retort, but Bondi raised a hand. "No, let me finish. You want a reaction, here it is." The air grew thick as Bondi's voice dropped lower, raw with emotion. "I've spent my life fighting for what I believe in, while you hide behind punchlines." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Colbert's usual quick wit seemed frozen. Bondi leaned in, her gaze unyielding. "Tell me, Stephen, when the laughter fades, what's left of you?" The studio was dead silent. Even the crew stopped moving, stunned by the shift in tone. Colbert's usual confidence wavered, his fingers tapping nervously on his desk. He tried to summon a joke, but the words died in his throat. Bondi's words had struck deeper than anyone expected. The audience held their breath, waiting for his comeback, but none came. Bondi exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. "I didn't come here for a fight," she said softly, her voice now tinged with sadness. "But I won't let you reduce my life's work to a punchline." The raw honesty in her words left the room in stunned silence. Even Colbert's usual smirk had vanished, replaced by something unreadable. The tension was unbearable. A single cough from the audience echoed like thunder. Colbert cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time in years, the king of late-night satire seemed at a loss. Bondi's words had dismantled his usual armor, exposing something vulnerable beneath. The audience watched, riveted, as the power dynamic shifted before their eyes. Finally, Colbert took a slow breath. "Pam," he began, his voice uncharacteristically quiet, "that wasn't my intention." The admission hung in the air, shocking everyone. The man known for never backing down had just conceded ground. Bondi studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. The studio remained silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on them all. The air between them was still charged, but the hostility had softened. Bondi's expression shifted, her earlier fire cooling into something more contemplative. "Intentions matter, Stephen," she said quietly. "Words have consequences, even when they're dressed as jokes." The audience murmured in agreement, the mood shifting from tension to reflection. Colbert ran a hand through his hair, exhaling deeply. "You're right," he admitted, his tone sincere. "Sometimes, the line between satire and cruelty gets blurred." The honesty in his voice was disarming. For a moment, the two adversaries simply looked at each other, the unspoken understanding passing between them. Bondi gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I appreciate that," she said, her voice warmer now. The studio seemed to exhale collectively, the earlier hostility dissolving. Colbert managed a faint smile, though it lacked his usual mischief. "Guess even I need a reality check sometimes," he murmured, more to himself than to her. The audience, still reeling from the emotional whiplash, began to applaud, not the raucous cheers of a comedy show, but something quieter, more respectful. Bondi smiled softly, her earlier defiance replaced with grace. Colbert watched her, his expression unreadable, but there was a new respect in his eyes. As the applause faded, the energy in the room had shifted entirely. What began as a verbal duel had transformed into something far more profound. Colbert straightened in his chair, his usual levity returning, but tempered now. "Well, folks," he said to the audience, "that's why live TV is terrifying." A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd. Bondi laughed lightly, the sound unexpected but welcome. "And that's why I usually avoid it," she quipped, her tone playful for the first time all night. The tension broke, and even Colbert grinned, the earlier heaviness lifting. The studio seemed to breathe again, the crisis averted. But the moment had left its mark. Colbert's next joke was gentler, his barbs less sharp. Bondi engaged with ease, her earlier fire now a warm glow. The audience watched, captivated, as the two found common ground, not as enemies, but as two people who'd glimpsed each other's humanity. As the interview wound down, Colbert surprised everyone once more. "Pam," he said, sincerity coloring his words, "thank you for tonight. I needed that." Bondi met his gaze, her smile genuine. "So did I," she admitted. The studio erupted in applause, this time full-hearted and warm. The credits rolled, but no one moved. The crew, the audience, even Colbert himself seemed reluctant to let the moment end. Bondi stood, offering her hand. Colbert took it, shaking it firmly, not as opponents, but as equals. The cameras caught the exchange, a silent testament to the night's unexpected turn. As Bondi walked off stage, the studio remained hushed, still processing what had transpired. Colbert sat back in his chair, staring at the desk for a long moment before looking up at the audience. "Well," he said with a tired smile, "that's our show." The usual upbeat outro music played, but the mood was anything but usual. Backstage, Bondi was met with quiet nods from the crew, their usual indifference replaced with respect. She smiled faintly, exhaustion and satisfaction mingling in her expression. Meanwhile, Colbert remained on set, lost in thought as the studio emptied around him. The episode aired later that night, but the raw, unfiltered emotion couldn't be contained by screens. Social media exploded, not with memes or hot takes, but with genuine discussion. Viewers praised Bondi's courage and Colbert's humility, a rare moment of depth in the noise of modern media. The next morning, headlines called it the interview that changed late night. Critics dissected every word, every pause, but the real impact was in the hearts of those who'd watched. For once, TV had shown something real, not scripted conflict, but human connection. Colbert addressed it in his monologue the following night. "Sometimes," he admitted, "you think you're the smartest person in the room, until someone reminds you you're not." The audience applauded, sensing the weight behind his words. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. Bondi, meanwhile, gave no interviews. She simply returned to her work, but those who knew her noticed a lightness in her step. The encounter had cost her energy, but it had also given her something, validation, perhaps, or simply the knowledge that she'd stood her ground. In the weeks that followed, the clip went viral, not for its drama, but for its humanity. Comment sections, usually battlegrounds, were filled with rare moments of agreement. "She had a point," wrote one user. "He listened," admitted another. For a brief moment, the internet was united. Colbert's show saw a ratings spike, but more importantly, it saw a shift in tone. His humor remained sharp, but his targets were chosen more carefully. Bondi, too, found herself approached with newfound respect, even from former critics. The night had changed them both. Years later, the interview was still studied, not as a takedown, but as a masterclass in dialogue. Professors showed it to students, not to teach debate tactics, but to demonstrate the power of authenticity. In a world of soundbites, it stood as a testament to real conversation. Colbert and Bondi never spoke again, but neither forgot that night. It lingered in Colbert's occasional pauses before a joke, in Bondi's rare smiles during interviews. They'd touched something in each other, a reminder that beneath the roles they played, they were just people. And so, the story of that night lived on, not as a clash of egos, but as a moment when two fierce opponents found common ground. In the end, it wasn't about insults or comebacks. It was about listening. And for once, the world listened too.